Hello everybody, welcome to Escaped Reality. My name is Ghostboy259. Escaped Reality is the aftermath podcast type show where we take your comments and we dissect them a little bit further. Sometimes I'm on my own, sometimes I have a friend with me. Today I have the Cash Man.
Hey, how you doing?
No story behind the name, he's just the Cash Man. So today we're talking about the Simple Games video. If you're not a fan of like the more casual tone of this video, totally understand. There's going to be another video in about 2 or 3 weeks. In the meantime, we're just going to dive right into the conversation, and then we're going to get into your comments a little bit later. So, thank you for joining us. This is your first appearance on Escaped Reality.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
You're like our biggest fan, too. Like, you messaged me on Facebook, and we're like, first.
Yeah,
I saw your video first.
I get super excited whenever I get to see one of those notifications pop up.
Right? It's exciting.
Got to support my boy.
So you're a little bit on the I was going to say like you're on the older side, but you're not that much. You're 10 years older than me. So your history with gaming is a lot different than mine. You grew up in an era where well, first off, I should probably mention, if you haven't seen the Simple Games video, the episode of Reality Escape, the show is called Reality Escape. It's confusing, I know. Link in the description. If you watch that, that'll help you understand what it is we're talking about, because we're going to make references to it. We're going to read comments from it. So if you haven't seen that, go watch that first. This will make a lot more sense. So you come from an older school gaming background. Like, did you play like Atari games and stuff like that? Or were you more like Super Nintendo, Sega kind of? Like, what was your first generation console?
I'd say the first Nintendo was the big deal. Like the Mario games, Duck Hunt, Blades of Steel, all those types of games, especially Zelda. I started with that and then progressed from there, right? So it was definitely old school for me, and arcades were still big at the time too, so getting both worlds, getting the home consoles and still going to arcades.
Well, arcades is a great example of like really simple games. Like, you're going and paying money, and these games have like a control stick and maybe 2 buttons. So that's exactly like what we're kind of talking about in the video, right? Like these games that are really just like, because when you're going to an arcade machine, there's no tutorial, but you instinctively know what to do, right?
And the stakes are higher. You're putting money in, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you learn quick.
So you wanted to talk a little bit, because you mentioned before, you want to talk about stick death?
Yeah.
That's like is that a Newgrounds thing, or am I completely off basis? I know Newgrounds is like an old Flash thing. I was kind of around for that, but I wasn't on that part of the internet growing up.
Stick Death was its own website, if I remember correctly, but it was definitely in the same vein as Newgrounds. It was just a very simple, extremely violent game. I mean, you just shoot them up. There's different varieties. There's like hostage situations, there's sniper situations and stuff like that. But it was just such a simple, fun, over-the-top, violent, simple game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think most people, when they're first, I don't know about now, because I feel like now a lot of kids will like jump into like Steam games and like Fortnite and stuff, but like our introduction to gaming in my generation was like Addicting Games, Mini Clips, OneMoreLevel.com, stuff like that, right? Like all these small little flash games and stuff that you would spend hours on because you're supposed to be paying attention in class, but you're in the computer lab, so of course you're going to be playing games instead. Because I don't know what, like, because you would have been just out of school kind of when that stuff was starting to really like become mainstream, like those kind of websites and stuff, right? So did you have any experience in that, or were you, because I know you played console games, you're not like a huge PC gamer guy?
No, because at the time computers were so expensive, right? So I mean, you had a family computer, that's what it was. So right. You gotta hope your parents got a decent graphics card, but yeah, I was still able to play like Counter-Strike when it came out. That was a big deal. But to even go back further, like you say you played in school, right?
Yeah.
We got to play Oregon Trail in school.
We got to play that too,
right?
We got to play that too.
But I tell you, that's all we had. And I think we had Miss Pac-Man as well, possibly. So there wasn't too many of those games we can play at school. But yeah, I mean, like I said, Newgrounds and Stick Death, they were in the infancy. And it was very mature content too. So it was kind of like discovering South Park in a way, or like on the internet. Like, it was so beyond what we should be accessing, but it was exciting because it was something new. It was like I said, over top violence and just crazy content that was super fun and it was kind of edgy, right? So everybody was talking about it.
Yeah, well, it's almost like it was right out of that era where you had games like the Atari games and the NES games, but nothing was going too over the top violent yet. And this is the first example of like the internet like taking something for its own, right? Like if you wonder that if we didn't have those kind of violent games, would we have the violent games that we have now, right?
I'll give you an example. Like when Counter-Strike came out, it was very controversial because it literally got delayed due to 9/11 because it was terrorist versus counter-terrorist.
Right.
And that was a mod of course, Half-Life. So right around that time, it just seemed like there was this huge shift with all those websites coming out with these very controversial games. And of course, they weren't coming out for the consoles; they were coming for PC because there was like the Wild Wild West, essentially, right?
Well, there was a ton of like, I mean, like obviously these aren't the simple games that we're talking about, but there was tons of like Flash games and stuff like that of like killing Osama bin Laden as like George W. Bush, like just over the top, ridiculous looking things. But there was like more than one. There was like 100 of these things.
It bred a community, right? There was a huge community of them, and especially like we keep going back to Newgrounds because Newgrounds was like a hotbed for it, right? I mean, everybody was just encouraging each other to one up each other, right?
It's like 4chan before 4chan really became 4chan.
It was exciting, and that website was always high traffic, right? So it's kind of waiting a long time just to load a game because you got so many other people on the server, right? And it was big, man. It was fun.
But if you take like the most complicated game from Newgrounds, it's probably not that complicated, right? It was all pretty basic stuff.
That's why the term simple games really comes up with that, because it's point and click. Yeah. Sometimes you may use your keyboard. Yeah. You know?
So I feel like I'm interviewing you almost, but you're a pretty busy guy. You got a full-time job. Even today, this is one of your days off, and you had like 5 hours of things to do before you could come over here to record. So I know that you do sit down and play console games sometimes, but you don't always have the time to do that, right? Because I think you have like a PS4 and you played like The Last of Us and like Red Dead and stuff like that, right?
Yes. I do have a somewhat gaming PC as well. I have slowed down a little bit on some of the games. I think I've become more picky and more cautious when I purchase a game.
And that's because of the time restraint mainly, right? Because you don't have like 60 hours a week to put into it.
Yes, not like when I was younger. I had that crazy ambition to play as long as I could at the stake of losing sleep.
Yeah.
You know.
So, do you ever play like one of these like 60-hour games and like just play it like 20 minutes every night and it just takes agonizingly long? Or do you have other games that are just like one and done? You can put it on for maybe 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever, and then...
I'd say I'd lean more towards phone games for that. Sometimes I really get into some phone games for a while, like I overdo it and kill it. And there's other games like, for example, was a very simple click game which called Shakes and Fidgets, which I've been playing for probably over a decade. And that's a game that you can just go in, click a few times, and turn it off. And I can't seem to put it down all these years later.
You still get that rush of it being a game. Like, you still feel like you're playing a game.
Yes, and it's community-based too as well, right? I mean, you're a part of a guild, and you're to contribute as well in it. And there's people that just been on there talking for, like I said, over a decade, right? There's relationships you form on some of these games, and they're not hard. They're just literally point and click and, set a time limit, and that's it.
Well, I know that, like, the I don't know if you're familiar with like the .io games. There's like, I don't know how to pronounce any of them because I don't know if you do EO at the end or it's like there's like agar.io. Anyway, there's these really simple games that like literally they're all like click and point games, but you're in a server with like 100 people and you're just playing games. You can't chat with them most of the time. And so it's kind of like that, like sometimes if I only have like 5 or 10 minutes, I'll open up that and I'll play. And I know that's something that a lot of people have asked me to talk about, and I'll get there eventually. It's in the works, but I have other things I'm working on too. But the agar.io or the .io games and stuff, I'll cover that eventually. So for everyone asking, leave me alone. But yeah, so like, because sometimes, like there are games, like you just said, you're a little more picky. So there are probably games that you wanted to play, but because they're just too complicated, you can't get into it. Like, you played the first 3 Mass Effects, right?
Of course. I obsessed over them.
But you haven't touched Andromeda, I'm guessing.
You know what? I did buy it, and I was so pissed off just because the game, when it came out, was not a well-crafted game.
No,
Let's put it that
I'm
way.
not.
I'm
I
trying
wasn't
to
a huge
criticize.
fan. Like I respected it for what it was, but it wasn't what I was hoping for. But did you finish it?
No, I think one day I will go back and attempt it because I've heard they've tried to update some of it.
Yeah.
I think I was just so let down based on just the foundation the other games like laid out for us.
Right.
You know, there was a great progression. Every game there was massive improvements and just technical stuff that they did and great character development and good story. And then it just seemed like this last one was kind of like made by somebody else. Like it was like, here you go, take an awesome franchise that has great history and then start from square one with like almost like an amateur approach.
And then I guess it goes back to the time thing as well. Like if you had more time, you probably would be more inclined to finish it because like whatever, I still have time, I can play these other games. But because you have such little time to play games, that you feel like, okay, well, I could play Mass Effect Andromeda, or I could play this clicker fidget game, whatever that you were just saying, right? Like those are the priorities in your head because you feel like you're wasting your time with that. Meanwhile, there's a point and click game that you've been playing for 10 years, and you're like, this is better than Mass Effect Andromeda. Well, not better, but you know what I mean. There's a preference there.
If I was to do that and just say, hey, look, I just want to play something simple, I would throw on like, let's say Fallout 3. I play the game all the time. I'll throw it on.
You can play it mindlessly at this
Yes.
point. Not at the beginning because you're focused on the story and stuff, but if you've beaten it multiple times, then you can just mindlessly.
You could wander and discover things that like potentially no one else has discovered. These games are made so well that you can just wander around and have fun and do simple tasks, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be so in-depth sometimes. You get to choose your own adventure, essentially.
Well, and that's something we'll get into a little bit later with the list of games I have, where people are talking about games that are simple, but they can go either way. Like the biggest one I saw, some people mentioned Pokemon. Like the Pokemon games, you can play extremely complicated, but if you want to play super casually, you can still beat the game just fine. And there's no difficulty setting on that, because difficulty setting was a big topic that a lot of people commented on, and I do have stuff based off of that as well. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is just like there are games that you would like to play, but because you don't have the time, you would rather just have a simpler experience where you don't need to learn, you don't need to invest yourself, you can just kind of mindlessly.
It's true. I mean, because I guess it really does make me more, I guess, biased towards things that I trust and know. That's why I kind of wait for those big title games, like without getting too far off topic, but like whenever Rockstar's going to drop a game, I know that I'm going to pre-order it, and I don't care. I'm not into the pre-order culture. I think it's ridiculous, but I trust Rockstar so much with the way they make games. It is they are just expressing their love of games, and we get to share that with them. So I trust them so fully that I don't care what it is. I'll just buy it and know that I'm gonna love it. You know, like,
and you'll make the time to play that.
I ruined my life because of it. I ruined my sleep. You know, that's all I could talk about. I obsess over it.
Well, when we worked together, I took a week off for the same week that Andromeda was coming out. I took a week off to play it. And it was like, I finished it within like the first 3 or 4 days, and I was like, oh, okay. Oh. Like, I probably would have been content playing for like an hour after work every day instead. But, you know, that's just how it goes. Well, kind of off topic, but you know what I mean.
Just even to wrap that up, that being said, I think that with having less time, it actually, you get to savor your favorite games more in a way. Because you're not
rushing anything. It's like watching a show once a week instead of binge watching it, right? There's a different charm there.
Yeah, I mean, I get that mentality. I need to finish because that's in nature. We want to just complete a task, you know. But in that being said, I mean, given that you have a little window, you get to savor that so much more. You can kind of look forward to that being the end of your day to cap it off, knowing I get to put that time into that game.
So how often do you choose, let's say, like a mobile game over like a console game or something? Like if you're at home, do you ever find yourself just playing a game on your phone and not using your PC or a console?
Yeah, I can say that. I mean, I'll be multitasking sometimes. If I don't want to dive deep into a game, I'll just grab my phone and I'll watch a show, and then I'll kind of like click a few times on my phone and put it back, you know. And so I think it's kind of like a new wave. It literally brought like the old games I grew up with and put them on the phone, and allowed them to be passive games. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they're not too intrusive.
Well, yeah, I think like if you're like into the multitasking kind of thing, like when they had like the fidget spinners coming out and the cubes and stuff, and they were saying like kids today just need to have something going on. For me, mobile games are that for me because like I have a thing where I can't stand watching most TV shows because most of them are boring and they don't use the visual medium enough. It's basically a radio play. And so my parents, when we're eating dinner, they'll watch a bunch of really bad like cop shows and hospital shows, and I don't need to see what's going on. I can just listen to it. So I'll put on a game that's, like you said, like non-intrusive. It doesn't really take away my energy or my attention, and I'll listen to the show while I'm still playing a game, and it makes me feel like I'm accomplishing something, that I'm keeping my brain active, which in reality I'm probably not, because it's like a game where you connect dots, but at the same time it makes me feel better about what I'm doing.
That's right, man. It doesn't, that's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter what game you play. It's about how you feel when you play it.
But I would never like watch a TV show and have like the Suicide Run in Mass Effect 2 on at the same time, right? Like those are games that you want to focus on. You want to give them the proper attention. But if I'm playing, I don't know, like I didn't play it because I think it was only on iPhones for a long time. It was Mario Jump is what it was called. And it's all you do is jump through courses as Mario or something. Like, if, I would play that while watching a movie or watching a show, but I would, there's some things that you want to give proper attention to, but if it's mindless fun, then...
Oh, exactly. I mean, if I'm watching a show I'm really into, there's no way I'm playing anything.
Well, yeah.
It depends on your mood, right?
Yeah. Depends on how much you really like the show, I guess.
Yeah. If I watch a Big Bang Theory, I would just turn the channel, first of all, and then I would watch something
Big Bang
else.
Theory is the shocking part of that statement.
I hate that show, to be honest. I'm sorry.
It's over. It's over now. It wasn't the greatest thing. If you like it, that's fine, but it's not my thing. It's not his thing.
I'm old.
Yeah.
What's your go-to simple game?
Well, I mentioned it in the video, Mini Metro. Mini Metro is really... I mean, I also mentioned, like, Tower Defense as well. And Tower Defense is also my go-to game, but I didn't want to, like, talk about it for another 10 minutes, because I made a video on that. It got a lot of views. You probably saw it. No, Mini Metro, because, like, there's an endless mode on there. So if normally when you're playing, if a station gets overcrowded, in fact, I already filmed like an hour and a half worth of Mini Metro that's going to go behind on the screen while we're talking right now. So people are watching me play Mini Metro. But if you're playing normal and a station gets overcrowded, you lose. But if you're playing endless, you can't lose. So it just goes on forever. And so I don't feel like there's any pressure for me to like have my attention paid there. So if I'm watching a YouTube video, I can have Mini Metro on the side. I can, making sure I'm filling out my stations, making sure the passengers are getting from wherever. And it's just like relaxing and fun, right? Like it's just, it's you could pause, like not every game that you can just like pause and walk away from. But if I like left the game running and walked away for 5 minutes and came back, it would still be running completely fine. Like, at near the end of the footage that they'll see, the time lapse, there were points where I wasn't actively looking at the screen for like 20 minutes, but the game was still going completely fine, just because that's just how the game works. It allows you to do that and focus on other things. I don't think anyone, if you're playing on the difficulty setting, like the harder settings, I think people will pay full attention to what's going on. But if you're not, then you know what you're getting into. You're playing a game that you can't lose. And so it's just like, it's good to de-stress. Of course, I'm in the same boat as you, where if it's a game I'm already super familiar with, then I can kind of play it and zone out. Like, a lot of times I'll just open up the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion and just start killing as many people as I can, or I'll start no-clipping through the entire city just to see what kind of weird things I can find, because that's pretty mindless for me, because I'm familiar with the game. But if I'm, like, doing the main quest or a side quest, I'm going to be focusing on that. I'm not going to be watching a video on the side or anything like that, right? And I've got a couple on my phone, like I said, when I'm watching TV or, in between periods of a hockey game, because there's just commercials on or whatever. Sometimes you just need to feel like you're doing something. But most of my go-to ones I talked about in the video, so.
I have a question then, like, in the same vein. What would you say have some of the simple games that you play have the best background music that you can keep listening to over and over again without having to turn it off?
Most of the time I don't listen to the background music in them.
That's right.
Sometimes there's some nice tracks here and there that are really, they're good, but the thing about the games is that the game was developed in mind not to be a complicated experience. And so generally, they're not trying to make music that's like trying to provoke thought or make you think. They're just trying to put music that sounds good with the game, and it'll often end up being like a 30-second loop. And there's only so much of that you can take. One of the mobile games I mentioned, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, has like the same track constantly running through it, and it's like I like Star Wars music, but I'm playing this game for an hour every single day. I'm not going to always have the music on. That's too much.
Oh, I noticed that too. I mean, there's some games that really do take the time to develop an amazing track that can be listened to over and over again, like almost soothing music in a way that can de-stress. But then there's other big like games that come out that just don't put that thought in, and it's just this horrendous, over the top, like nasty music that you turn off within seconds of playing the game.
Well, one of the things, like, I had played during the tower defense video, I played Plants vs. Zombies, and I didn't know much about the game when I first played it. I had played it for the video, but I heard the main theme and I was like, this is really good, and I guarantee you a bunch of people have nostalgia over this. So before I showed the game on screen, I played just the music, and a bunch of people commented like, oh man, I got so excited when I heard the song. And that's like sign of a good game and good music. But not all games have that. Like I turned off Mini Metro's music on day one. I'm sure it's fine, but I'd never personally listened to it, because if I'm playing a Mini Metro, especially, it is a simple game, but you can play it for like an hour and a half. Like, I'm not going to want to listen to the same thing for an hour and a half, right? Playing like a game like Bloons Tower Defense or something, all you hear is balloons popping over and over and over and over and over again. It's like, all right, I can only take so much of this. But I also think that's like a new... that's a thing that's newer with the generation. That's a whole other podcast that we should probably get into another day. But, listening to the game audio versus listening to something else on the side. I just played... Oh, I can't talk about that because that's spoilers. I can't talk about it. I'll tell you afterwards. But anyway, I just played a game recently that I hadn't played in a really long time. And when I was younger, I was afraid of this game. So I would play music or podcasts while I was playing. Because this came out when I was 10. And now I'm 23. And so I played it recently, and I just had the audio on. And it was like a whole new experience. Because it was like I'm hearing things I hadn't heard before. I'm still getting freaked out because I'm a scaredy cat. But I should probably stop moving my chair so much. Anyway,
that reminds me of when I was a kid playing Doom or Wolfenstein.
Well, someone mentioned Doom as a simple game as well, where you can really just zone out and play it.
But the music and the sound effects are so eerie. And I keep jumping, but in the same vein, like Duke Nukem as well. All those type of games have creepy music, and as a kid, it was just like I just wanted to turn it off because it just almost wanted me to stop playing the game because it freaked me out so bad. Yeah.
All right, well, why don't we get into some comments here? We've got some really good comments. There's one I forgot to print out, so I'll look on my computer when that time comes, but that's fine. Well, first off, every time you do a video like this, people are just going to mention games. They're going to talk about games that they thought should have been mentioned, or sometimes they're not so aggressive about it, and they're just like, what about this? So here is a list of games. I didn't list every single one mentioned in the comments, but there's some really good ones here I want to talk about. Number 1, Rocket League. Now, Rocket League, I actually struggled a long time if I should add it or not, because at its core, it's very, very simple. You're a car playing soccer, and that's it. And you have boosts and stuff. The reason I didn't add it is just because I felt like it was a lot more of a learning process when you're first learning how to play it. It's not something that you can be good at right away. The people who are good at it, like the quote-unquote professionals, I assume there's a professional league, there has to be, they practice for hours. There are obstacle courses you can do. There's different settings, different modes, different maps and stuff like that. I was close to mentioning it though, and I think it really comes down to the idea of that I kind of mentioned earlier, where a game can be simple, but you can get into it more if you want to. Yes. Right? Which is a huge thing about these games, because once again it adds to that accessibility conversation about like, I like Pokemon and I leveled up my starter and I beat the Elite Four. Or it's like, I like Pokemon and I made sure to only level up my Pokemon using this move so it increased his special attack so that this was more effective for this, Two different ways to play the same game.
I agree. I think what you're trying to say is that, Rocket League has a learning curve. If you even want to score, you have to get the fundamentals down. Right. So in a way, I agree that it's not entirely a simple game. It's almost like a hybrid.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like I said that I didn't want to oversimplify a game, and that was my big worry about Rocket League, was trying to oversimplify it so it would fit the group. But I definitely think that it's definitely worthy of a mention when it comes to, like, it is really easy to pick up and play, but to be good is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Another one that I thought was really interesting that I never considered was Pokemon Go.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Right? That's kind of an interesting one. Because, I mean, I guess it's walking around and you're throwing... See, I don't know much about it. I didn't play it because you have to leave your house, and why would I do that?
That's why you're still alive. You didn't fall off a cliff or something, yeah.
We had a guy who I used to work with him. I told you this story on Monday that he showed up 2.5 hours late because he had stayed up till midnight the night before playing Pokemon Go. And we start at 5 in the morning, so he was just asleep.
That is a phenomenon. I see, like, old people playing that game, like people in their 60s.
It's still pretty... A lot of people still play it.
You know what it is? It's their kids. It started connecting kids with their parents and their grandparents, like I've noticed.
People who aren't Pokemon Go... People who aren't fans of Pokemon play it.
Yeah.
And I think if you can... Like, the ultimate testament to, like, a simple game is if your, like, grandfather who's, like, 65 and doesn't know technology that well can understand.
If you could pick up that game, it's a simple game. It's a good simple game.
So I would say Pokemon Go absolutely belongs on that list.
Yeah.
Plants vs. Zombies was another one mentioned. I covered that in my tower defense video when we mentioned it briefly here. It was on mobile. Extremely, like, the most basic tower defense game you could possibly have. And it's, accessible, no problem. This is a really good one. This is the favorite one that's been mentioned so far. This is going to blow your mind when you hear this. Mario Party.
Wow,
right?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That is an amazing example.
Mario Party is great because at its core, yes, you need to collect coins, you need to get stars, you need to traverse the map, but each mini-game is based off of a really simple concept. Now, I haven't played the later ones. The last one I think I played was 8, or maybe 6. But I feel like the mini games are getting a little more too complicated now, and a lot of the ones on the Wii were kind of like WiiWare. It was kind of like, look what we can do with motion controls. But if you go back to like the first one, the mini games are god awful boring, but anyone can play them, right? It was literally jump up and down, hit this thing, hit your head on this thing, don't fall off the ledge, push another guy off. They definitely got more complicated, but even then, I feel like if you were not great. Like, I mean, I've been to so many parties with people who don't play games, and we'll all start playing Mario Party because anyone can play it. It's easy.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a great example. It was a plethora of a lot of different mini games with characters that you loved, and at the time when it first came out, it was fun. I'll give it to you. Like everybody would love to gather around and play that game. It's just like Smash Bros. Just with mini games, right? So.
No, I thought that was a great... I don't know... Actually, I'm going to look up... I want to give credit to the person who said Mario Party, because that was awesome, and I should have put that in. Block Installer 12 said, simple, accessible games are nice to play every once in a while. You can't just play one simple game for too long. That's why minigame collection games like Mario Party and WarioWare are so successful. And then someone else said... someone else mentioned it, I thought. Mike... This is Michael, but it's Mike AEL. I think simple, accessible gaming is one of the great things with Mario Party. It was about the only game I played with my whole family. And that's probably why it got so popular, because it came up with families, right? Parents were like, I can play this with my kid.
Oh, exactly. And at the time, I mean, it came on Nintendo 64. You got 4 controllers, so the whole family can kind of jump in, and you can take turns too. So I'd say that's a genius suggestion. So good call.
Okay, so the first comment I want to get in here, I didn't print it out, so I got to read from my computer screen here. The first comment I want to talk about, this is kind of an interesting one. So this is top, I had a line where I said the definition of gamer is changing and evolving with every passing day, which is true. And Alibek Kobayev, I hope I'm saying that correctly, said, these games are good, but I don't think you're a gamer if you only play those. To be honest, what is the definition of a gamer? I have 6,000 hours in Dota 2 and about the same in World of Warcraft, but I have never played those famous RPGs because I don't really like them. Am I a gamer or not? I'm playing a lot of mobile games. Does it make me less of a gamer? Maybe this is a good topic for another video. So a gamer, I look up the definition, a gamer is someone who plays games, right? I think that's, you could say that a gamer is like, oh, it has to be hardcore, it has to be 15 hours a week. I don't buy into that stuff personally. No. If you played, I mean, even in your comment, you said you played 12,000 hours of games. You're a gamer, you know? I don't think it makes you less of a gamer because you play mobile games. I think it makes you more of a gamer because you feel like you have to keep playing games. if you only play mobile games and you really like them, if I told you I had 6,000 hours on Clash of Clans, would you say I'm not a gamer? Right? Like,
that's true. You know what? That's the thing. We shouldn't be thinking too hard about this. Like,
we're not trying to gatekeep gamer. Like, honest, like, you know what I mean by gatekeeping, right? Like, oh, you can't be a gamer because of this. The gamer is like, and I know there's a lot of memes about like gamers rise up and all that crap. Not what I'm talking about here. Gaming, like, you know, because there are accessible games, I think that anyone who plays games could call themselves a gamer. And you might think that's too vague, but like, my mom's not a gamer. She doesn't play games. My dad, I wouldn't call my dad a gamer. He plays maybe one video game every 6 months, right? He'll play like Call of Duty, the thing. But I wouldn't call him a gamer because he doesn't play games. I mean, he plays it every once in a while. That I wouldn't call a gamer. But if you play a game, like, once again, I'm gatekeeping right now. But if you play a game like once a month or something, or you played games in the past, yeah. I don't think you need to think too much about the definition of gamer.
No, we just gotta let people just have fun and
just
go
let people
at
have
their
fun.
own pace.
Yeah, enjoy whatever you enjoy, but I wouldn't think less of yourself for playing mobile games. If anything, I would think more. But thank you for your comment anyways. Appreciate it. Next comment I want to get to is from Henry Eraser. He says, difficulty should really be up to the developers and not to anyone else. However, with that said, any game in a series is expected to maintain what defines that series, which is a series being easy or hard shouldn't switch. If someone isn't good enough at a game and doesn't want to put the time in to get better, then they should just watch a Let's Play of it. So this is a very hard stance in one direction. This is very much the person that says, you know what, if you're not good enough to play this game, don't play it. Watch someone else play it.
That's old. That's an old school.
And there's nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to have your opinion, and I'm not saying that's the right or wrong answer. I'm just saying that this is very much a firm one stance.
You know what? And I can see where he's coming from, because the games that I grew up with were exactly like that. There wasn't a lot of difficulties on there. They were hard.
What do you suppose like the completion rate for like Contra is, right? Like
there are some games that you're just gonna get like pissed off and turn off, right? Hey, I love to bring up the Angry Video Game Nerd, but he brings up a lot of those points. A lot of those older games were hard as hell.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was the developer's problem, but other times they were just difficult. But you know what? There's nothing more satisfying as beating some of those games and putting the time in.
Yeah.
You know, and that was your reward, is if you could get past it, you know?
The one thing I will say is that it's not so much if someone isn't good enough at a game and doesn't want to put in the time. Well, that leads to the question about time. Not everyone has the time, and I think if we're the younger generation, I think you maybe don't appreciate how little time adults have. So here's a great comment from Jimmy Ward that says, completely agree that simple games should exist. As I've gotten older and work/life has gotten in the way of my gaming hobby, I love being able to pick up a game like Katamari Damacy, I don't know how to say that, or Equinox and just play for 15 to 20 minutes while food is cooking. I tend to play some bigger games like this too with the latest Assassin's Creed I used to play for a bit with a podcast on, complete some locations on the map for a little bit, and then go about my day-to-day life. So this is the exact opposite of someone who doesn't want to play.
That's right.
He doesn't want to watch a Let's Play. He doesn't want to watch someone else play it. He just doesn't have the time. And he appreciates these games because they allow him to continue gaming, which is a lot of people who, you know, like you who grew up as you're older, these are the games that allow you to keep being a gamer, you know? These are people that are you're pretty busy. He's busier than you, right?
Yeah.
He's probably got kids. Maybe he has kids. I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know anything about Jimmy Ward, but, you know, so if you have only 20 minutes a day, like he literally says the only time he really has time to play is when he's cooking food.
We should be thankful then, because this is great. This is a great time for all types of gamers out there.
Yeah.
That there's accessibility to anything that fits your lifestyle, right? So this is a great time for gaming. And
well, we're at the peak of gaming and stuff, and because there's so much back catalog and back library available still,
you can visit everything.
Yeah, you can find something that works for you, right? You know, I'm sure if Jimmy Ward really wanted to play Contra, well, he might not get a chance to because, you know, he only has 15, 20 minutes. But I'm sure he could find a game that's similar enough that allows him to save, that's not as hard, that still allows him to have fun. So, Thanks, Jimmy, for that. And thank you, Henry Eraser, for your comments as well. Two different perspectives, just two things to consider, right? Rotten Legacy said, when it comes to simple controls, now I don't know how to say this game, but it's 6 V's in a row. It's like V, 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 V. Anyway, he said, that's a great one, although I wouldn't put it in the same category as these. The controls may be limited, you only have 4 buttons to use throughout the entire game, but it's deceptively difficult. The level design is excellent, without it the game would be repetitive and easy. There is a story too, one that I personally have put a lot of emotional investment into. So while VVVVVV definitely wouldn't fit into this video, I still feel the need to mention it. And then RS Gamer said something very similar about Ibn Ab, which I put in the video as well, where it's deceptively simple because all you do is you only have 2 buttons. In Ibn Ab, all you can do is jump. Mm-hmm. But it's a puzzle game, so it gets a lot harder. And these are both puzzle games too. We kind of talked about it earlier when we talked about Pokemon. You know, these games can be played more than one way. In these cases, they're simple because the controls are simple. But, you know, it is like that step above. It's like a hybrid between like a complicated game and an easy game. Because those games, by all means, are not easy. Those are very difficult games.
I like that. I like the progression. At the beginning, it's deceptively probably simple. And then it becomes advanced.
Right. And
in a way.
A lot of people commented on like games that start off really simple and then work their way up to be more complicated.
That rewards the time you put in. If you're advancing and developing skills later on, that's what my definition is of a great game. You know, you don't want it to be too easy to the point it's forgettable. You want something you have to put a bit of effort into. But
at the same time, you might not call that like a simple game. That might maybe not be what we're talking about here.
I mean, there's certain elements maybe in there, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like another hybrid game of like some simple, and then it turns into something completely different. Right. The game develops.
Right. Well, that's like a lot of idle games, right? Like the clicker games that I talked about in the first video. A lot of them start off simple and they get a lot more complicated.
Yes.
So thank you, Rotten Legacy, for that. Derulative Aussie says, when I think of simple games, I think of games that let me mentally go into autopilot mode, where there can be a challenge to take care of, but doesn't become a major problem if I choose to do so. I love games that have depth in them and sort of long-term goals to strive for, but can also be played without that. So we talked about that a little bit earlier too, playing Fallout 3 mindlessly, just walking around discovering. You can do the main story, or you can just wander, what is it, Washington, D.C.? in that game?
The ruins of Washington. And that's a game that can be very depressing too, which is hence the podcast is very handy.
Yeah.
Get a comedy podcast, get something that gets you engaged, or even listen to a history podcast. That's even crazier.
You're a huge podcast guy too, so.
Yes. So to me, I never would have imagined growing up that one day that I would be listening to like people speak and then playing a game at the same time.
Right. That would be like a thing you have to go to like a live show for.
Exactly. And it's just you have a whole plethora of things to choose from. You can learn while you game, you can laugh while you game. There's just everything is possible now.
Yeah. All right, we got one from Robo Chicken here that says, I'm glad you made a video on simple games and accessibility. It's an important topic, especially with the recent Sekiro argument. Do you know Sekiro?
No.
Sekiro Shadows Fall Twice, I believe it's called. It is a FromSoft.
Oh, wait. Is that super hard
It looks
game?
like a Dark Souls game. It's
the
same guys.
God, that game's insanely hard. Yeah.
While I do agree with difficulty settings, accessibility and difficulty are two different things. In my opinion, a game can be simple but tough to master, as you said. Clash Royale, for example, is just dragging units on the field, but the layers of strategy can be overwhelming. That doesn't mean it's inaccessible, it just gets tougher. Difficulty settings are a good idea, but if it feels like it goes against the design of the game, I would rather games stick to their design philosophy. Sekiro, for example, is a FromSoft game which are known for brutal difficulty for a niche audience. The players should know what they're getting into.
100% agree, and I could even tell you, they're not hiding that. No one's hiding that when they develop that game and say, hey, look, this is going to be tough. And that's kind of, it's also an old school mentality, the way the games are made. A lot of the games that came out when I was younger, they didn't have instructions. They didn't tell you how to do certain things. You kind of discovered them on your own.
A lot of them didn't even have tutorials. Like Contra starts you off in the middle of the battle.
You got to think, like growing up, we didn't have any like reviews for games. It was like you got to read in Nintendo Power or any kind of other game magazine.
The company actively trying to sell you the game.
Yeah, and so you could maybe read some strategies there, but you kind of had to figure it out on your own. That being said, it's like that game's not for all gamers, and that's okay.
It's not for me. I can't play it. I tried to play Dark Souls, can't do it.
Me neither. And I think it comes down to I'm not young anymore, and I don't have that time, and I don't need to have my blood boiling over a game. Yeah. But doesn't mean it's a bad game. It just means it's awesome for the people that love those challenges, and they should be made. I champion that. That's awesome.
I think that this is a response to when I talked about Pillars of Eternity, because Pillars of Eternity has a story mode, which basically means you still do combat, but every enemy has been ridiculously nerfed, so you can just experience the story. Now, I don't know. I know that the FromSoft games have... Is it FromSoft or FromSoftware? I think it's FromSoftware. But he might have just abbreviated it. Anyways, like I said, I don't know much about them. The thing about Pillars is that it's a very difficult game to play, but they have a story. The FromSoftware games... they do have a lot of lore and a lot of story to it, but
they're
it's not
strong story based.
Well, yeah, it's not the focus of it. I guarantee you there's a good chunk of players who don't know anything about the story, but it's a niche audience. They play for the difficulty. Right. So I 100% agree with what Robo Chicken has said here, that accessibility and difficulty are two different things. I'm sure there are people who want to play a game like that, but unfortunately there's just not something like that out for them.
That is tough. I kind of see where you come from. Be like, I want to be able to play every game out there.
Because to me, like the Dark Souls, what lore I have seen from it, it seems interesting and intriguing, and I'd like to know more. But it's something that I'll just, unless I want to read a Wikipedia page about it, it's something I'm never going to experience because the game is too hard for me. I can't do it.
I think the reason why the games got so big though too is because the difficulty made them bigger than they are.
The game became so
this game may not have even existed if it had the difficulty settings that you required.
True.
So it wouldn't get that because it kind of broke the norm in a way, because it went to an old school thing of saying this is gonna be tough. You know what you're getting into. You may not know, but like this is not gonna be as easy as you think, and that's okay. It's okay. So in a way, I do champion a game like this because whoever does enjoy those games and likes to deep dive into them, all the power to them. We get to see some really cool Let's Plays because of it. You know?
Well, and that's where I think the Let's Plays will come in handy. A game like I personally wouldn't watch a Dark Souls Let's Play because I think it would be a lot of the same thing. But if there was like a video, I'm sure there's tons of videos, I just haven't looked them up, like on Dark Souls lore that just explained it, I would watch that, right? Because I'm interested in the lore, but the game's not for me, and that's fine, you know? Even if the game had an easy mode, I probably still wouldn't play it. Like, I'm not that interested. But it is a good argument. I think the Dark Souls, Sekiro, and then the whatever the other Bloodborne games. Those are great examples of like they play it for the difficulty, not for the story.
Yeah, exactly. It's that thing of saying I beat this. Right. You know.
Our last comment here. Oh, well, first off, thank you, Robo Cheeking, for that. That was a great comment. And the last one we have here this is a long one, so get ready for the sit down. This is from ZX Chrono. I'm sure it's probably ZX Chrono, but we're in Canada, and ZX sounds really cool. I feel like accessibility shouldn't necessarily be the standard for all video games, but I also don't disagree that it should be taken into consideration. Yes, if the developer's vision is to have as many people play as possible, then making a game that will allow everyone to experience the game at their own pace is essential. But that in itself can limit the kinds of games made and can even negatively affect the experience of everyone on every difficulty if it isn't done properly. Examples are plentiful, but some notable things are oversimplifying buttons to remove all the challenge on one hand and creating needlessly overbuffed bullet sponges on the other extreme. Stuff like this can make a game feel completely different based on difficulty choice, and that might not be a developer's wish. So this, just to cut him off here, this would kind of be, he's talking about an example that would be like, if you were to play Mass Effect on easy to hard, it would be like, oh, it's the exact same except this guy takes a few more bullets, right? He goes on, he says, I suppose in an ideal accessible world, every game would have properly implemented difficulty options that allow you to tailor the experience to your level of investment, skill, patience, etc. I just hope accessibility doesn't become a mandate or even a complete turnoff with its lack thereof. If, for example, a game is hard and you'd rather the game not be, that is not accessibility in my eyes. I'm not entirely sure that is what you're arguing when you ask that games in general be accessible by everyone beyond being a functional game can be completed with due effort. I don't think you're arguing that every game must be infinitely accessible, perhaps more that you hope accessibility is taken into account when it matters. There are people who would be turned off of the game like Nidhogg's homage to Atari graphics, but that game didn't need a better graphics mode to be accessible in its gameplay. I feel my dissent is mostly a knee-jerk reaction to hearing you advocate that a game have easier options because the game is hard. In your example, however, I verily agree that with there being a story mode difficulty when a game's strength for some people might be the story over combat, even if the combat is really good. But ideally, games should be made for a target audience. If you want everyone, then go for it. But I'd hope that we can make gaming accessible by having as many different kinds with different intended difficulties and various levels of required investment in as many games as possible, rather than every game be accessible to everyone with only the level of investment you are willing to put into it. Maybe it's the idea that a game should challenge everyone equally that has become antiquated, but it is a sentiment that won't go away by making everyone able to play. Many people like a challenge, even the people who play on easy mode. Wow. There's a lot to dissect there. I like this comment because he even said like I didn't expect to type that much. I didn't realize I typed that much. I think it's great. I'm gonna take a drink of water because that hurt to read. Thoughts, Cashman?
I gotta say that is a very well in depth question. It's almost like you're asking the questions as you're writing it, being like, what should we do and what should they do?
You can hear him arguing with himself as he's typing it. He was like, I don't like this idea of having a story mode, but with Pillars of Eternity, if the story is the main focus, then yeah, it should.
Because you don't want to get in the way of the developer. You don't want to strong arm them to say, hey, look, you should make it more accessible, unless they can find that proper balance, like he was saying, to make it accessible. But that being said, though, the developers do have these visions for how they want their games played, right? And so that's wherein lies that difficult struggle. Like, how do they make it accessible for everybody? But that being said, there's some people that are they just suck at games, and that's okay.
Well, Pillars of Eternity, I think, was the perfect game because Pillars of Eternity is a top-down, turn-based combat game. So it's a lot like Baldur's Gate. It's a lot like Divinity Original Sin. Actually, I would say Divinity is a little easier to play. But it's not a game type that you see a lot nowadays. It's very old school. And so to have a mode where you don't have to worry about that stuff, where you can still have a challenge, but you're not going to be overwhelmed because you have to pause every 2 seconds, set what all of your guys are doing, and keep redoing that, I think is great because they knew that there was an older game type. They knew the story was the best part about the game and not the gameplay. And they allowed people like me who, I like playing hard games occasionally, but if it's a really good story, I would rather not get frustrated at not being able to beat a boss and then not be able to continue playing because of that.
Oh, I agree.
And so, it's a perfect example of when accessibility is a good thing because they knew a lot of people weren't familiar. There are tons of people who played Baldur's Gate back in 99 who were like, I know exactly how to operate this. But if you haven't played those games before, and I had minimal experience already, there are people who have no experience playing these games who would not be able to play Pillars of Eternity.
You know what? This comes down to possibly the difference in our age too. But like, there's some of those games, like you're saying, that you can feel like you're getting stuck, you can't get past. Back in the day, we used to just cheat and be okay with it, right? I'll give you a prime example, like in the GTA 3, right? Grand Theft Auto 3. Back in the day, I wasn't as skilled as I was at the beginning. So sometimes you'd be doing a mission and your car's about to explode. Well, I just memorized how to restore the car. In a way, it's like I wasn't too upset. Like sometimes I'd do that because I want to get past the mission. But as I got better, I stopped cheating.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel too bad about giving myself a little bit of boost because I wanted to see how that mission played out. So I would try and take away the stigma from cheating a bit. Sometimes you can cheat a little,
I cheat sometimes. But, I also think about like console games. A lot of newer console games don't have cheats.
This is where it's changing.
If you just get stuck, you're stuck.
Yeah,
you can't call your big brother down to come help you beat the level.
Maybe they should start bringing back a little bit of the cheating, a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, like because on some of the PC games that you can kind of go in and fix some things, like Fallout's another prime example of that. You can go in there and like completely change everything. You could walk into a situation where they're overpowered. You can literally freeze them. You can take away their weapons and just finish it the way you want it to finish, right? I've had to do that sometimes because I feel sometimes there's glitches in a game that you kind of have to step in and kind of correct it to get the ending that you wanted, essentially, right?
I think Dark Souls is a great example for the whole difficulty thing because it is a niche audience, and am I extremely hurt or offended that I can't play it? No. Would I like to? Sure. The other thing that we haven't talked about yet, and I'm not blaming this person, ZX Chrono, for not thinking about this because, like I said, they want to have their thing. But this is something, and I'm going to talk about this in another video. So this is kind of like a teaser for 2 videos. But in a couple months, I'm going to make a video on this, is people who physically cannot play these games. People who either have some sort of epilepsy, people who have a physical disability. Where do you put them in this category? Do they not have the right to play these games, right? I think Let's Plays are perfect for people like that, but if you're a gamer, you want to play. You don't want to just watch. Sometimes I watch Let's Plays for games that I know I can't play, for games that are multiplayer that I don't have anyone who will play with me, for games that I would just rather experience with somebody and it feels like I'm with somebody. But if it's a game that I know I can play and I have access to, I would rather play it, And so to say watch a Let's Play, this is kind of going back to that first guy that we talked about, to say just watching a Let's Play, I don't think that's enough. Because, we're gamers. We like to play games. And so if you have someone who has a physical disability, yes, there are ways that they are working around that. And there's a lot of new technology and stuff that they're working on. But where do you feel the accessibility lies when it comes to that? That's a loaded question. And I'm not going to make you go too in depth because, like I said, we're going to talk about it in another episode. We're going to do a whole episode based off of more accessibility and difficulties and stuff because it was a hot topic here and I'd like to dive into it more.
It's a great topic.
It is. And this is like we're moving away from simple games, but it's all a part of the conversation, I feel like. I feel like there's definitely an itching for more.
Just even dive in a little bit, not too deep.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I watched this video because I was really into Street Fighter at a certain time, and there was this video that came out I think about 10 years ago where this young kid that was like literally wheelchair bound, he had no use of any limbs, all he had control over was his mouth.
Yes, I've seen this.
Yeah, and someone had the controller up and he used his tongue and his mouth to play, and he was good. Yeah. You know how inspiring that is? It's
inspiring, but then you have to consider not every person is capable of learning that, right?
That's true. I mean, I think...
And I don't like and I don't like using the life isn't fair excuse because we live in a world where why not? Why shouldn't they be allowed to play games? 20 years ago, someone who only had one hand could never play a video game. It just wasn't a thing. Nowadays, there are so many controllers and inventions where someone with one hand can play a game better than someone with 2 hands, right? And it's a growing and changing world, and I know I'm sounding total social justice here, but that's just the part of me that wants everyone to experience things and to have the experiences that we get, right?
Exactly.
So we're not going to dive too deep into it, but it's something to consider is, if you have someone, even going to the more like autistic route, those people, they want to play games too. Why should they not be allowed to just because... Now, I'm not saying they have to play Dark Souls specifically, but I think simple games are great for that kind of thing because it doesn't require a lot of energy. It doesn't require a lot of learning. They can pick it up and go. So, yeah, I think that it's hard, right? I understand that you can't make every game for everyone, and I do think that games studios should target a target audience, but I don't think that sometimes they consider just how big their reach really is, how impactful their game can be, and what kind of fans they have. Somewhere out in the world, there's like a 9-year-old girl who loves Dark Souls. Right? Yeah. That's just the world that we live in now. And you would never think of that because when you think of Dark Souls, you think of probably someone that looks like me. Neckbeard, a little overweight, only wears shorts, probably doesn't smell that great. But it's true. That's probably what you think of.
Literally the name is tied to your actual soul.
Yeah. But there are... the reach is different now. The world is more accepting and people are allowed to be in whatever they want to be into.
Yes.
And so kids are finding video games a lot younger now, and they're becoming a lot more passionate about it. And I guarantee you, in the next, like, the indie game thing right now is insane. In the next 10 years, all the best-selling games are going to be indie games. Because these kids who have the pure passion since they were a kid for it, they're going to be the ones making it. And, you know, I just don't want to be in the world where it's like... You know how it's like the guy who made colorblind glasses was probably colorblind when someone who wasn't probably could have made it a long time ago? It's like that. I don't want a guy with one hand to make a game that only guys with one hand can play. I want someone to step up and do it for him because he shouldn't have to do it on his own. Why can that person not be allowed to play games and enjoy them like we can? There's no reason they shouldn't be allowed to, right? That's all I want you to think about. We're all humans. We all love each other.
So tough,
we're all in the same team. That's all I want you to think about. I'm going to leave that conversation with you. I'm sure the comments are going to be a tire fire.
Oh my god. There's no way. It's like making a game for only someone that sees one color. I mean,
Well, that's another thing that I'm going to talk about in the other video. I'm colorblind, and there are games I can't play. Now, I'm not saying that every game should have a colorblind mode, but why does not every game not have a colorblind mode if color is the main thing? I'm just being real with you guys. Shout out to any developer that has a colorblind mode. Thank you so much, because I can't play a game without it.
It's like gonna make a game that there's no game behind. You know, it's like I don't think there's ever gonna be a time where everybody's gonna be fully satisfied. But I do agree with broadening your portfolio and expanding different games for as much people as you can.
Like I said, Pillars of Eternity was the perfect game to have a story mode. I think that's the right track. I think if games have a story mode, like I said, there's a lot of casual gamers out there. People who grew up watching Let's Plays, who just care about the story, they don't care about the gameplay. Now, you don't have to completely dismantle Dark Souls, but imagine if they just had a Dark Souls mode where every enemy had like 1/10 of the health. And I mean, I'm not saying they would sell millions more. I'm sure people would be upset. Some of the people whose comments we read would probably be a little upset about that. But it would require minimal effort from them, and their game would be more open to people who just wanted to hack and slash away and resolve the story.
Well, I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it would be from the studio or developers that would do it. But I think the modder community could definitely make some of these things happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
The other thing, too, is that I think when you talk about difficulties, people assume there's a easy, normal, and hard, right? But what I'm not necessarily saying that there should be a harder mode than what's normal. You know, if there's Dark Souls, I don't think there is even. I don't know if there's difficulty settings in Dark Souls.
I don't think so. You just jump in. And
you just jump in and you start playing. So like, I'm not saying that there needs to be a hard mode just because we have an easy mode, we have to have a hard mode. But you could easily add an easy mode. All right, people are gonna get really upset for me for saying there should be an easy mode on Dark Souls. I know there is a target audience for it. I know the target audience isn't for casual people, but the people have a bigger reach than they think now. That's all I want. All I want you to think about.
You're making it sound like Dark Souls is like a man's only gym.
It's like, look, there are some women who want to come in here too. They have better equipment. The washrooms are cleaned more often.
Oh, some exclusive club, right? It's like,
here's the thing: is like, not to call anyone out, but like, I feel like whenever I read a conversation about accessibility and difficulty in games, Dark Souls, FromSoftware games, Sekiro, Bloodborne, those are the games that pop up. Those are 99% of the conversation. If you go to any trailer, any Reddit post about it, someone's going to talk about the difficulty, how they rage quit, because that's what made the game famous, right? So,
but you should, everybody in life needs to have failure. I think it comes down to, like, we need to have difficulty in our life, too. It can't all be easy, because that's not a fulfilling life. Now,
I'm not saying
extreme.
I'm also not saying make the game so simple that there's no challenge.
That's right.
I'm not saying making a walking simulator, but imagine a guy like Jimmy Ward, whose comment we read earlier, who only has 10-15 minutes to play.
That's right.
He doesn't have time to learn Dark Souls. He likes Assassin's Creed. He'd probably be interested in Dark Souls or Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, I Fall Twice. I have no idea what it's called. I'm butchering the name every time I say it. But, he doesn't have the time to play these games. There's parents who have young kids who don't have time to play these games. I'm just asking you to look at it from their perspective. I'm not saying you're going to agree with me. It's fine that you disagree. I understand, and I agree with a lot of your opinion, too. I think people should have target audiences. I think people should know that there are certain games they can't play. I'm just asking, why can't they play those games? All I want you to think about, just take a look and could really consider why shouldn't some people be able to play certain games. I'm not attacking anyone. If you have a completely valid reason why you don't think that someone should be able to play games, the guy that said that if someone doesn't want to put in the time to get better, they should just watch a Let's Play, that's an extremely valid opinion. If he really feels like if you don't have the time, then you shouldn't be able to play it, that's fine. But if you're like me, where you feel like, why should one person, why should there be exclusivity? I can't say that word.
I wouldn't be able to do it better. But it's such a good point. But it's so hard. I keep bouncing back and forth.
There's no right or wrong answer.
No,
right?
I think that's okay.
I think it's a debate that is going to keep going until the end of time, and I just think that we're definitely getting to the right side of it. I think Pillars. I keep going back to Pillars adding a story mode. That's a huge step. That was a game where I wanted to play it, and I was so terrified that, like Baldur's Gate, I would get stuck somewhere, I would get frustrated, I would leave it, I would come back, forget how to play, and I would just get stuck because, there are games where you just make one wrong decision. Oh, you leveled up this instead of this? Well, you can't. You've messed up. That's not the meta. You have to go back and restart now. And I was afraid with Pillars because I was like, this seems like a Dungeons & Dragons type game. The story, from what I've heard, is amazing, and I really want to experience it, but I don't think I'm going to be able to play it because I'm just not good at these games. And then story mode was a thing, and I was like, okay, I can experience the story, and it's one of the best stories I've ever experienced in gaming. And I think of how many other people, had that story mode not been there, would not have experienced those.
So right? What we need to do is you need to start a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe for a modern day Game Genie.
Yeah, pretty much.
Game Genie was. Do you remember Game Genie? It was a little bit before your time.
We had Game Shark.
Game Shark. Okay, so it's in the same vein.
Yep.
You get to select the things that you want to happen right at the start of the game to make it a little bit easier, modify it for your experience.
Maybe the answer is just more cheat codes, more available modding on consoles and stuff. If that's the answer, that's a great answer. That's a legitimate solution.
That's how we did it back in the day.
Yeah. If that's the answer, then that's a great answer. Just modding your consoles, modding games, stuff like that.
Get developers on board with it, and then have them create some tools that are in the game that can easily be modded from the start.
Yeah. And like I said, no right or wrong answer. This is just our opinions, but we'd love to know yours. So leave us a comment down below. I'm way more active in the comments in the podcast stuff. And you know what? If there's enough comments, if there's enough people who are asking for more, we can always do a part 2 of this topic because, or we might wait just because there is going to be a whole episode of Reality Escape based off of it. But I hope we've given you something to think about. In the end, if you have your own opinion, that's great. Everyone should have their own opinion. You should kind of know how you feel. Think about it. Your opinion is not any less valid just because it's maybe a little bit on the harsher side, because that's a legitimate way of thinking. That's how the world was for a long time. I just hope we made you think, and we hope that we gave you something to think about. Just remember, in the end of the day, don't attack anyone for having a different opinion than you. We're all on the same side. We're all on the same team. We're all just humans trying to live out this long life, trying to figure out what the heck it means.
It's a difficult life at times.
Yeah. So, and you know what? Games help people with stuff. They help people escape the world. They help people escape reality. And that's where the name Reality Escape came from when I was 13 years old and I wanted to make a company. And 10 years later, here we are. So just consider why maybe someone else shouldn't be allowed to play a game. And yeah, we'll wrap up there. I think that's a good place to wrap up. Thank you for joining and listening. As I said, please don't attack anyone else who has a different opinion than you. Have a civil discussion. Don't yell at anyone. Don't call anyone stupid. Don't say that someone's opinion is wrong, because I know it's a joke and it's a meme, like your opinion is wrong, but I hate that.
Keep the conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely, because Cashman and I here, we don't have the right answer necessarily, but maybe you guys have, or are one step closer. Maybe you can relate to a story and you have a different point of view that we've completely missed out on. We're 2 people, and we read from 6 or 7 people today, but maybe you have a completely different viewpoint that none of us have even considered, and we'd love to hear from you if that's the case, because that's what Reality Escape is. We're just all in this together. We're just trying to have fun, just trying to play some games, just trying to show appreciation for it, and we'd love to know what you think. As always, you can follow us on Twitter. We're a little more active there. You just set up your account like 2 days ago, so maybe not you. What's your at?
It's going to be at Cashman.
At Cashman?
Yeah.
You might not be able to get at Cashman exactly, but whatever it is, I'll put it up on the screen, and we'll figure that out. I'm at Ghostboy259. If you want updates from the Reality Escape channel, just like subscriber updates or when something's coming out, at Reality Escape YT will be your source for that. Thanks for coming on, Cashman.
It was a good time.
Yeah, we'll do it again. You'll see him around a little bit more. I did the Tower Defense podcast on my own, and it wasn't the greatest. And just a big thanks to everyone who watched the Simple Games video. I had very low expectations for it, and they were minimally met, but I was really happy with the conversation, the comments that was going on. A couple people were even just going back and forth with each other, and I thought that was awesome, because I want to create a community here, and to see people kind of buying into that is really pretty freaking neato, to say the least. Yeah, it's cool. So thanks to everyone for their comments. If we read your comments, if you want to respond to what we said, like I said, keep the conversation going. We're always here. And we'll see you in about, you won't be here. I'll be here. I'm always here. But I'll see you in about 3 weeks, and see you soon.